good morning and or good afternoon, as the case might be, and potentially some good evenings as well. And welcome back to our live webcast series. My name is Dalibor Petrovic. I'm a partner at Deloitte here in Canada, and I have the distinct pleasure of leading our CIO program and services. Many of you who are returning for this series would know that we've used this platform over the last couple of years to bring you conversations with top executives in Canada who we believe are shaping the future of our country as technology leaders. But we are also using this platform to bring you other interesting content. And today is an exceptional day. I am humbled to be joined by my good friend and colleague, Mike Bechtel. Mike Bechtel, whom I will let introduce himself in a minute. All that I would say is that Mike has by far the coolest title in the whole of Deloitte. He is our chief futurist. And Mike, exactly, ta-ta-ta. And Mike is teleporting today from Chicago, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Excellent. So Mike, first of all, thank you very much for your time. We have an hour together. For the audience members, today's discussion is going to be about the future of technology. And I will let Mike tell us the story. And as a futurist, of course, provide his perspectives on where is all this heading. I will warmly invite you to join the conversation. The Zoom platform that we are on has the Q&A feature. So if you do have any comments or any questions, please use the Q&A function of the Zoom platform to start the conversation, and we'll do our best to answer any questions you might have. So with that, and grateful thanks to both Deloitte and CIO Strategy Council of Canada that is co-hosting and co-sponsoring this session. Mike, welcome. And over to you for a brief intro and then for the conversation.
Well, thanks, Dalibor. And it's always so fun to team with you. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be, with most groups most of the time. But from the moment Dalibor and I clicked in to the preparation session, it was smiles all around. You, sir, a fellow technologist and optimist, it's an absolute treat to team as much as we do, and I'm grateful for your partnership, brother. And folks, for the 100+ and climbing of you who've joined us today, I'm grateful for yours too. I'm Mike Bechtel, as Dalibor said, chief futurist. What on earth is that? Well, my team and I, about 20 of us, we make heads or tails of what's new and next in tech. And the reason we do that, right, we have plenty of problems today, right, and opportunities today, right? There are fires to be put out and prevented in the current week and or quarter. And so folks, understandably say, like, why would we want to look 3 or 5 or 10 years out when we've got plenty of hairballs to unravel today? Well, here's the thing. Today's innovations stand to become tomorrow's technology debt, right? The stuff we build today, no matter how innovative, no matter how pioneering, they're going to be our successors' core modernization projects. And that's not meant to be like, that's not a bummer. It's actually a reminder that the future's always coming. And so the naive response to that is, well, we better get busy future-proofing. You can't future-proof, right? But you can make things forwards compatible, right? Future-friendly. And so think of today's session not as shiny things, right? And distractions from today. Think of it as a set of headwinds and tailwinds that you can ride and dodge, respectively. I think I said that right. Willy Wonka reversed that. Ride the tailwinds. The idea being that if you're building today's solutions with tomorrow's currents in mind, you can literally get to your preferred tomorrow a little bit ahead of schedule, right? That's the business case. That's the utility. That's why this is steak and not just sizzle. But by all means, let's sizzle. Let's talk. So let's go ahead and light this candle and talk about what I like to call a brief history of the future. Now, folks, I used to be an inventor. I worked in technology R&D for 12 years at a large professional services firm. And then I was an investor. I worked for 8 years as a venture capitalist on the quote, other side of the table. And whether I was cooking up world-changing novelty or sitting down and actively listening to a couple thousand entrepreneurs who are themselves cooking up world-changing novelty, the fact is I've been working up to my eyeballs in all things newfangled for 25 years. I like to joke. I was just joking with my better half this morning that I'm right at the inflection point between geek and geezer, right? Between enthusiastic optimist who believes we can build anything and, you know, well-worn skeptic who's got the scar tissue to tell you that not everything moves the needle. And I think it's that mix of lived experience, honestly, that leads me to believe that the right way to think about the future of tech is not to do something like this. Okay, super straight talk. As recently as 3-4 years ago, Deloitte would talk to its clients about emerging technology as this constellation of buzzwords, right? This a la carte collection of jargon, one piece after another, that, you know, it's bad enough that it's an eye chart, right? Whoa, there's a lot going on there. But what's worse is this feeling that there's going to be 12 more of these terms next year, right? And that, like, just as you get your handle on metaverse, you know, a guy like me or a gal like me is going to spring yet another dozen on you to become conversant in, fluent in, and, you know, drive the business around. And so, good news. I'm not here to hit you with the blizzard of buzzwords. I'm not even here to start with the future. Because what we've come to learn is that futurists are secretly historians. Which is why my 16-year-old son, he likes to say, he's like, Dad, that slide transition's fire. It's like, thank you, son. But we start by looking back. And so, folks, let's use the tools. Let's use the tools in chat. You know, kind of smoke them if you got them. If you got your chat ready, go ahead and take a guess in chat. What do y'all think this might be an image of, a picture of? I've kind of foreshadowed a little bit that it's in the past, not the future. So go nuts. Enigma, right? Turing's cryptography solve machine, right? The printing press is a good guess. The loom, it certainly looks like a loom. It's of that era. A lot of brass. A printer. Another vote for printer. Okay, winner, chicken dinner. Arvind Vidge. One of my LinkedIn friends and besties. Good to see you, Arvind. Got it right. It's Charles Babbage and Ada Lovelace's very first computer. And in turn, it's the world's very first computer. Now listen, in 1989, I'm in 7th grade at St. Victor School in Calumet City, Illinois. And my science teacher, Mr. McMillan, looks us all in the face and he says, the first computer was built in 1947, ENIAC, New Jersey. And that wasn't some, you know, jingoist, you know, USA kind of a lie, but it was wrong because that was the first digital computer. The first functional, right? The first conceptual computer was this thing built out of, you know, brass and steampunk era tech in 1843. I saw this thing live and loud, a recreation of it at the Computer Science History Museum in Mountain View, California. This was during my years as a venture capitalist. I'm receiving 80 startup pitches in a row. YC Demo Day, Y Combinator, the Harvard for Startups. Each of these pitches is 2 minutes long. They give us 2 bathroom breaks and a snack break. I took my own break. I'm eating Cheez-Its and drinking a Mountain Dew in the lobby. And I see this thing the size of a table. And I'm reading the liner notes, the design notes, right? The little plaque next to the exhibit. And what was so interesting was Babbage, in his like adorkably anachronistic Victorian language, says, "We propose a 3-tiered system comprised of a reader, a store, and a mill." I'm like, what? Huh? It says the mill processes arithmetic units in much the same way that a flour mill might process wheat into flour. Huh. And the store holds both the sort of arithmetic primes and the results in the same way a silo might store wheat and flour. Okay. And then the reader stamps these clay tablets and turns all of that gobbledygook into human readable, numbers and letters. Okay. And folks, that's where it hit me. For 165 years, Babbage and Lovelace had hit on the primes that I thought were revolutions in computer science in 1998 when I started learning how to code, right? Because I was sold the story at the dawn of the internet that the 3-tiered internet architecture was new, right? That we're going to separate the user experience layer from the data layer. And then in the back, we'll have the business logic as its own animal, and they'll be loosely coupled, and everybody's going to get rich. But it turns out Babbage and Lovelace were talking about the same 3 tiers 160 years ago. And that's when it hit me. What if the whole history of information technology has really just been these 3 things? And moreover, what if the whole future will continue to just be these 3 things? Hunches don't make for business strategy. And so we got busy researching. We partnered with the World Economic Forum. Okay. We said, we have a hypothesis that everything worth knowing in information technology has always been, and to wit, will always be, evolutions, not revolutions, along these 3 tracks: interaction, information, and computation. And about 300 pages and 300,000 hours and at least 300 endnotes later, this is what we learned. That the same thing Babbage called the reader, store, and the mill was made manifest, yes, in New Jersey, yes, ENIAC, yes, 1940, whatever, as PhDs with punch cards feeding machines the size of a room. And then, right around my father's generation, right? As a futurist, I'm very open with age and years, just like a financier is very open with money, right? So my dear old dad, right? He went to night school. He didn't need a PhD to learn how to work a computer. He went to night school to get trained to operate a command line interface, right? Look, COBOL, Fortran, BASIC, Logo, if you remember the little turtle thing. Dating myself. And he worked on a computer that was merely the size of a desk, not the size of a room. I graduated into a world where I didn't even need school. Remember dummies books, right? Java for dummies, right? Learn ASP.NET in 21 days. Took me 24. The point is this: interaction, information, and computation are enduring, but the way they show up at work evolves, right? And so before you know it, manuals, like, not only do you not need a dummies book, like proper technology is such a sophisticated, simple interface that you don't even need a manual, right? And then on the information side, well, goodness, we've gone from doing arithmetic to math on math, which is how I like to think of analytics, to predictive analytics, right? Math on math that projects what's next. And in turn, on the computation front, what's it been a story of? It's been a story first of shrinkage, Moore's law, but recently of segmentation, of sharding, of saying, well, now that I've moved my computer from a room to a desk to something on my desk and then to the cloud, which is, secret, it's not a cloud, it's just somebody else's desk. What we're starting to see is that it's dematerializing, right? And so things like blockchain, Web3, et cetera, which we'll get to in a bit, don't think of it as a revolution. Think of it as, well, just what's even less materialized than my computer in somebody else's basement? My computing sharded over a couple 100,000 people's basements, right? Because none of us is as trustworthy, maybe, as all of us. So let's take a tour. Let's take a tour at this juncture of the leading edge of the now, right? Virtual reality. Virtual reality has been around for 25 years. Right? And I'm not here to tell you, have you heard of VR? Knock your socks off, right? What I'm here to tell you is that VR, AR, augmented reality, and the metaverse, right? Which as a geek, I've known that term since Neil Stephenson's book Snow Crash, 1992. But the whole world knows that term as of a very meaningful corporate rebrand about 6 months back. But the real takeaway here is this stuff is just turning the corner from tech to toy to tool. Think of it that way, right? We've seen AR, VR, immersive reality demos for, as I said, 20, 25 years. The difference is edge compute, GPU compute, right? Bandwidth, 5G, Wi-Fi 6, low Earth orbit satellite, and sociocultural acceptability. Wearing a computer, that's crazy. We're norming to it, right? The moment for VR right now is less of a revolution and more of a recognition that computer screens have spent the last 25 years going from about this size to this size to this size. And the one thing we know about user interaction is A, it gets simpler. B, something smaller than this ain't so simple, right? I'm already at the point where I'm buying the bigger watch face because I'm squint. And so don't think of AR, VR, metaverse as this ad hoc a la carte fad. Think of it as an evolutionary recognition that simplicity is the greatest form of sophistication. And the next most simple way of interacting with digital information is to get beyond the glass and to recognize that we can start to interact with digital information spatially, either in a different place, virtual reality, or by decorating our physical place, right? Augmented reality. Now, the unsung hero here, the unsung hero of simple state-of-the-art interfaces is smart speakers, smart digital assistants. I don't want to say them by name because I don't want to light up, 100 of your offices and living rooms right now. But the real point is this. Interaction and interfaces move towards simple. This we know. And while we might feel like talking to a computer is just as gimmickly as throwing on a headset, the best futurists are kids, right? And when my daughter, Annabelle, I'm an open book. When my daughter, Annabelle, comes into the office and says, "Dad, what's the weather?" My instinct is to flip open the laptop, authenticate, two-factor, weather.com, right? Zip code, enter. It's 76, honey. She thinks I'm a weirdo for that, right? Her instinct is to say, "Hey, speaker, what's the weather?" The point is this: the technology gets more complicated, but the user experience gets simpler. Everything that comes into the world after we finish high school or college feels newfangled and wacky. That's why we have a rich tradition in North America of hating our kids' music, right? That's our problem, not their problem. And so think of the kind of the twin turbines of AR, VR, Metaverse, and conversational voice, not as noise, but very much as signal. Now, let's talk about information. Oh, Q&A. How does one become a futurist? That's a good question. It's a good break too. Again, I want to encourage dialogue, so I'll answer that. I think one becomes a futurist by both studying the frameworks and best practices that allow for projection, not prediction, of what's next, right? Trend lines, exponentials, et cetera. In my case, it was just kind of the quirky accident of having worked as an inventor and an investor. I had so much time seeing the portfolio of the possible and the subset of the profitable that I like to think I developed a facility for avoiding snake oil, right? Seeing signal in noise. And so I think a lot of it is really just studying what's been and as a means of separating kind of the preposterous from the plausible, possible, probable. And happy to provide you with resources. And too, the field is getting to the point where there are now accreditations, training, and even graduate programs. So, information. You'll notice a distinct lack of the term AI in this row, because AI is as buzzworthy and buzzwordy as metaverse. But here's the deal. AI is sort of a problematic term because, as one of my heroes, Larry Tesler from Xerox PARC, this guy literally invented copy paste. Like, how can you not rally behind the guy who invented Control-C, Control-V? Anyway, he famously said, AI is whatever computers can't do yet. And he said that in like 1986. And what's so brilliant about that statement is he recognized something that most businesses are only beginning to recognize, and that is AI is the mechanization, the automation of human discernment and decision-making. And human discernment and decision-making comes in all flavors and all facets all over the place. And so in 1997, when IBM Deep Blue is in a chess match against Garry Kasparov, my professor, Professor George, says, Deep Blue will never beat Kasparov. It's impossible. And we're, dutiful, studious students, and we're like, oh, yes, sir, absolutely. And then IBM Deep Blue licks Kasparov 2 matches to 1. Professor Wiedenoff the next day does not concede. He does not retract. He says, but it's not really AI. Here's the takeaway for business leaders, for executives. In a world where AI is whatever computers can't do yet, every time the computer pulls off something new, we just move the goalpost. Yep. Right? We move the goalpost every time AI pulls off a minor miracle. And so when AI beats Lee Sedol in the game of Go a couple of years ago, we say, yeah, but that's not really AI. Here's the punchline. A more useful term than AI. Oh, by the way, brain break. I love this one because my kids use it. This is a tool, AI, called Brickit, that'll scan your pile of Lego and show you what you can build with the bricks on hand. I also have a version that works in the bar. That's not in the presentation, but it's amazing.
With the instructions compiled.
Right. Right.
Wow.
You look to have 2 ounces, not 1, right? Right. That's exactly it, brother. But the takeaway back, okay, good that we had the brain break. Okay. A more useful way to think about this than AI, given the fungibility in the ever-moving goalposts since 1953 of the term. Think of it as, what is the trick that AI can pull off today that you can harness in your business for profitable purpose? And the trick that's causing so much boardroom buzz today is cognitive automation, which feels, it's kind of a jargon term, cognitive automation. But what we mean here is that we've gotten to the point where AI has turned the corner from pain in the butt, pesky critic over your shoulder, Monday morning quarterback telling you how you should have done it differently, AKA like C-3PO. Right? I think this is sufficiently part of the shared cultural experience where we all know C-3PO, right? What does Han Solo say to you? Shut him up, unplug him, never tell me the odds. Because 10 years ago, predictive analytics and data science systems would run this out-of-band report that showed you how things should have been. Yep. But it was vaguely not in time for what you need right then. Today's RPA solutions, right? Cobots, process automation code, they're more like Chewy, right? A quiet, helpful co-pilot. Guide on the side, got you out of trouble, right? Helped you dodge the asteroid, boss. Thanks. The point is, in a world where the goalpost for AI keeps moving, let's not fetishize AI. Let's figure out, okay, where can mechanical minds be useful next? Right now, it's as co-pilot, which is why we as Deloitte talk about the age of whiff, right? It's not about, yikes, robots taking my job. It's about, sweet, robots helping me with my job.
Yep.
Okay. Now, what's next here in the computation space? Yes. Oh, excellent point. I'm looking at the Q&A and again, try to keep things participatory. And Peter shares that the AI term was coined in a proposal to NSF for a 1956 workshop in New Hampshire, not 1953. Noted. That's excellent. And yeah, crazy to think though that we've been thinking about mechanical minds and calling it AI for over 70 years, or almost 70 years. So what's next in computation? Well, I foreshadowed this one a bit, and so I'll move a bit quickly through this one. Then maybe we can answer some questions before we go into the proper future. Post-cloud, many of us have heard of multi-cloud, right? I don't want to put all my eggs in any one counterparty's basket, so I'll spread them among 3 counterparties' baskets. That's reasonable and appropriate. But the way that we've been seeing blockchain tech, the way that we've been seeing Web3 tech, decentralized computing platform tech, right? Pick your term. It's not some manna from heaven, crazy, zealot change to everything. It's, as I said, this idea that maybe none of us is as trustworthy as all of us. Maybe. If the 19th century was God we trust, right? I still do, but, institutionally speaking, the 20th century was organizations we trust. Yeah, we're going to trust governments. We're going to trust companies. What we're starting to see in a Web3 blockchain world is maybe it's in math we trust, right? Maybe I don't care what you say about yourself, what somebody says about you on a Yelp, a Facebook, a Google reviews. Maybe I care about what the body politic, the community, the we says about you in an immutable public chain. When you think of it through that lens, my friend Ken Corliss, my colleague here at Deloitte, he often says, the trick with blockchain is to avoid falling in with the party goers or the party poopers. I've never seen in 25 years a space that immediately pulls people into big dumb binaries, right? Oh, yeah. Skeptics and zealots. The stories that seem to matter in business, right? For leaders like you, it's a good blockchain story when it doesn't start with blockchain. Yeah. Like Dalibor, I remember talking to the CIO of Chow Tai Fook,
Yep.
the largest jeweler in Hong Kong. And 30 minutes into that conversation, before he mentioned the word blockchain, he talked about his business challenge. And his business challenge was, over here, I've got synthetic lab-made diamonds who are a competitive pressure because they're cheap. Over here, I've got blood diamonds, unethically sourced. You don't want to know where these things come from. Yee, you know, like the antonym of fair trade, right? Also cheap. Said, what am I to do? Put a marketing slogan on my website that says, you can trust our rich history of authentic excellence. He's like, that's Web 1.0. Mm-hmm. Said Web 2.0 would be, yeah, no, show my Google reviews, show my Facebook rating, show my Foursquare rating. Like, pick your Web 2 crowdsourced opinion platform. Said, I don't know if that's the thing either, right? Web 3 says, let's write the color, clarity, cut, and carat of our stone into a public blockchain along with the GIA and laser engrave a serial number that identifies that stone forevermore on this public blockchain. Why? Because 2 years from now, when my daughter goes to appraise it, she's not asking for the local jeweler's opinion, right? She's not asking for a collection of local jewelers' consensus either. Web 1, Web 2. She's looking at the immutable record, the source record that can't be stopped and can't be faked and can't be killed. When you think about blockchain as the answer to a master data management problem between organizational boundaries, makes all the sense in the world. Evolution, not revolution, right? But when you lead with it, when it's the hammer looking for nails, that's where you get the skeptics and the zealots. And so, gang, right about halfway through, a little more. I haven't even talked about the future yet. All right, what kind of futurist is this guy? He's just talking about the past and the present. Well, that's because, again, futurists are secretly historians, and I want to prepare you with 3 key takeaways based on this journey to current that's going to help inform our understanding of what's next. The first, we've hit this note, right? But, you know, if you're going to note take, if anybody's going to note take, here's 3 notes worth taking. One, we've been in this long enough to see that the future, at least in IT, follows these enduring trajectories. Right? Interfaces getting simpler, mechanical minds getting more intelligent, computational resources getting more diffuse and abundant. Great. 2, the names are fungible, right? With full respect for our marketing teams and your marketing teams and those marketers on the call, I love it. I'm a storyteller right there with you. But this story was still this story before Metaverse became the Oxford word of the year, right? And cognitive automation was still cognitive automation before we started getting really, really enthusiastic about AI in the boardroom, right? And same with Web3 or blockchain, or call it what you will, right? Digital scarcity. The concepts matter more than the terms. And so permission to eye roll at the term du jour, but I would caution you to eye roll at the concepts below the terms. And then the biggie, right? And I open with this too. As leaders, we need to recognize we don't live at the end of history, right? We may be retiring in 3 years. Congratulations. But the party keeps going, right? Which is, again, why I think as stewards of our organizations, we need to understand where the puck is headed so that we can, again, not future-proof, but be more forwards compatible. So let's do it. As I said, our means of projecting what's next come from the work understanding where it's headed today. Every winning interaction paradigm ever has won because it's simpler, right? My daughter with the smart speaker, right? The lean back, poor posture, click and swipe, as opposed to the sit up, good posture, click and type, right? And. The information paradigms that have won have been the ones that deliver more intelligence more quickly. And the winning computation platforms are the ones that deliver more abundance and more can-do, get stuff donery in a world of ever bigger and hairier problems. And so with that in tow, what's coming next? Well, on the interaction front, we're projecting, along with MIT, along with leading researchers at Amazon, along with a number of folks who have been up to their eyeballs in interaction design, a concept called ambient experience. What's that? Well, here's what it's not. I took this picture for you today, dear guests, this morning. This is a screenshot of my Google Home app, which shows the number of smart, AKA connected devices in my house. And there it is, 86.
Yep.
And Dalibor, right? Like this isn't the part where the futurist guy is harming the environment with too much plastic crap, right? You probably have 86 as well.
Yeah, exactly.
And you don't realize it because this stuff is stealthy and quiet and it's in the background, right? Your thermostats, your light switches, your robot vacuum, your microphone, your laptop, your iPad, the other iPad.
Yeah.
Stuff
and you need to
piles up.
communicate with each of them distinctly. Hey, this, hey, that, right?
Well, and that's it. That's it, my friend, where too much of anything is too much.
Yeah.
And so in a world where you have 86 somethings with 86 IP addresses, you lose your mind. But again, futurists being historians, we have a pretty good sense of how you solve this kind of an issue. And no, it's not by like a return to class systems hierarchy and like servants. No. But conceptually, kind of. If you've ever seen the old show Downton Abbey, right? Lord Grantham, he didn't know everybody's detailed name and role. He asked the butler, and the butler asked the footman, who asked the valet and the chauffeur to do this, and then the cook, and on and on and on. The idea was it was delegation, abstraction, a marketplace of sorts where your needs were met simply and sometimes proactively by your assistants. Now, good news, we talk about robots and mechanical minds. Where interaction is heading right now already is this idea of ambient digital assistance, right? Think of Tony Stark in Iron Man, right? He doesn't have to say, hey, Jarvis, protect me from falling off of this building. He didn't have to say anything, right? Jarvis, look, like this guy's falling off a building, give him the nano suit and get him out of harm's way, right? That idea of proactive, just-in-time, right info assistance, where you don't need to remember the name of the smart speaker, that's where this stuff is heading. And again, why do we project this? Why do we believe this? Because in a world where simple only always wins, the next hurdle for simplicity is I've got too much stuff and I don't know which is which and it's all confusing. The spoils are going to go to the victors who integrate and rationalize and allow the sales professional, I'll give you an example, allow the sales professional at, say, a Salesforce, right? Using a tool like a Salesforce to say, on the way to the golf course, right? We moved account so-and-so to second base today, update the sales target to 30 million, right? Because that same sales pro ain't going to the laptop to fill out the updated report, right? Salespeople are famously averse to data entry. And so meet the pro where they sit, right? The line cook at Cisco cutting carrots saying, we need more carrots.
Yep.
That's a simpler user paradigm than going to the laptop with carrot covered hands and ordering more, right?
Like that statement that you made, that simpler always wins. That is such a powerful insight. That is an incredibly powerful insight. Like if I was to take one thing away and write it down in big block letters for everybody's benefit, simpler always wins, isn't it?
Dalibor, amen.
Right?
Yeah. The bronze medal leader can't handle complexity.
Yep.
The silver medal leader relishes in complexity. They love it.
Yeah.
They increase the complexity. Like give me give me an even longer take on this thing you read. Happily.
Yeah.
The gold medal leader handles complexity and gets it down to brass tacks.
That's right.
And I think gold medal technologies do the same.
Yep.
We as Deloitte famously never want anybody to think we're besmirching them, which is why we rarely ever talk about individual client names, right? Because we're in the business of rising all tides. But let the record reflect. There's a lot of organizations that have made real hay by realizing that complexity delivered simply is a winning strategy. Right?
Yeah.
So what's next in information? Well, the smart money, armed by this understanding of AI is whatever computers can't do yet, is beginning to recognize that AI to date has been all about math, science, numbers, STEM. But what about liberal arts? What about human instinct, empathy, emotion, charisma, spirituality? Now that sounds a little nuts, but the truth is, right? To a machine, emotion, instinct, body language, music of my voice, awkward pauses. This is just data.
Calculation, yeah.
It's data, right? And so does this mean the future of AI is falling in love with and marrying robots? No. Effective AI, emotional AI starts to recognize that there's a whole palette of tricks that mechanical minds haven't been able to do yet because we haven't had the data or the compute power to recognize the degree to which I'm smiling authentically, the wrinkles in my forehead, which connote gregariousness, right? Am I leaning in? Am I leaning back? Right? This startup, right, and many others have been experimenting with means of not just capturing the words you say in a job interview, but how you say them as a proxy for leadership, charisma, introversion, etc. Now, used incorrectly, could this be deeply problematic? You betcha. But used thoughtfully, intentionally, in a trustworthy way, governed by adults, right? And trained on systems that aren't rife with tacit and explicit bias, this stuff could be merely very useful, right? And so I think the takeaway here around effective AI is, if AI is whatever computers can't do yet, what about all sorts of stuff that involve emotional intelligence in addition to math? That's coming. Now, keeping things cooking. What's next up in computation? The spatial web. And again, you call it the spatial web, you call it augmented reality, you could call it digital plus physical, phygital. The words change, the concepts don't. The idea behind the spatial web is this recognition that, okay, if we've got something akin to individual sharded digital rights management afforded by something like a Web3 blockchain decentralized computing infrastructure, then we can start to imagine a world where we can augment and decorate physical latitudes and longitudes with corresponding digital reality, right? Digital twins, et cetera. Okay. Pokemon Go started to figure this early on, right? And granted, it was brought to you by Niantic and it only worked on their servers and. But imagine an open source, publicly shared, right, future wherein you could bring your own digital interface to any physical coordinates you wanted, and they were shared and open and tradable and commercializable and. Now, here's an example of, some random guy on Reddit, literally, right? I found this on Reddit, using Apple's AR kit, the Unity game development platform, and the LiDAR sensor hiding on your iPhone to map out a room and overlay Matrix vibes. Okay, that's a little bit interesting. But where it gets way more interesting, is you start to say, okay, well, let's introduce physical touch. Let's add parameters around viscosity, temperature, hard, soft, fuzzy to the metaverse. And suddenly you've got Jeff Bezos here using tools from haptics to do his, Beck's, robot overlord gesture here with these super gloves. I think the takeaway here is that we tend to focus on the metaverse as this escapist place to be instead of a crumbling reality. The research and the smart money really seems to be on no. What we're going to be doing is actually laying the best of physical information and additive information to our actual physical world, right? And just like the AI story, it's not about yikes, robots taking jobs. It's no, working with robots. I think metaverse and VR is going to prove likely to be less yikes, we're letting the world crumble, like in Ready Player One, and more no. We're going to use digital to enrich the physical, right?
There's a great example of a flexible remote worker who is a factory worker or a warehouse worker, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean, you know, I was having a discussion with a client who's a paint and coatings company, and they said, you know, it was clear to them that their warehouse workers, you know, that's never going to be a work remotely, work anywhere, work, you know, hybrid kind of a future. And with affordances in the spatial web direction, they start to see, okay, well, maybe it's not about like robot gloves as a diminished proxy for being there. Maybe it's, wow, robot gloves attached to meaningful physical robotics. And suddenly my people can lift 500 pounds instead of 50.
Yep.
Right.
Exactly.
And so with a lot of these, Dalibor, I think it's resist the temptation to see novelty as a diminished proxy for what we know. Yep. Think of it as a palette where you can paint things you could never do before.
Yeah. On the effective AI, I know we spoke about this, another client example where they're using the call center systems where they can actually understand through the voice of the client that they are serving. You know, what is the emotional states and people having conversations, and that it adjusts itself to match the emotional state of the caller. Like those are real live today's examples of effective technology in play, right?
Yeah. And to your point, Dalibor, I always use this term with my teams. We use this, it's just a piece of language we use together. We say merely very useful. And it's this reminder that there's a tendency in everything these days, certainly politics, yikes, to run into the corners, the big binaries, right? It's, you know, it's unicorns. No, it's the devil. And I think that, as you just said so well, effective AI as a replacement for spouses, that's not it. It's effective AI for a higher performing call center experience that matches and emulates your emotional state and gets you up to that human and quick if you're coming in hot.
Yeah.
Merely very useful.
Yeah.
Love it.
And I also love what you just said about the absolutes. Not blacks, not we all, I think, going on your Star Wars theme, only a Sith deals in absolutes, right?
You fist bump over the camera. Yes. This is Jedis appreciate the nuance in the middle.
That's right.
For sure, brother. So brain-computer interfaces. Okay. We're now at what I like to call the furthest stars, right? We're at the part, we're at the end of history, because if we've learned anything, it's that history never ends and that it's going to keep going. But like the Hubble telescope, or now the James Webb, right? You can see as far as you can see, and that's merely very useful. It doesn't mean it's the final thing. It just means here's the furthest incarnations we can see around interaction, information, computation. And the simplest paradigm we can see, even though the technology is mind-bogglingly complex, is brain-computer interfaces. Okay, what on earth is this? Well, the idea is really this. I had a colleague who said, listen, the only language with a greater install base than Java, Mandarin. And I thought, oh, that's interesting, right? And that's back to Dalibor's point about simple wins. Like, okay, well then let's teach machines to speak Mandarin. And we've been, mission accomplished. We talked about it. But by proxy, the only interface that's got a greater install base than Mandarin is human thought.
Yep.
Right. And so imagine a world where we don't have to talk to a computer, we think to a computer. Now, like most emerging tech, this stuff starts as tech, then it's a toy, and eventually it's a tool. And right now it's a toy. And these two knuckleheads who my son turned me on to, my son Brady, it's like, Dad, you got to watch these guys. They're playing Pong with their brain. Said, what? And sure enough, this game Mattel Mindflex Duel on this YouTube show, Good Mythical Morning, the fella on the left is going, boop. And the guy on the right goes, boop. And it's an example of how one could think to a computer. You say, well, that's a toy. Yeah, but what if you could think to a computer that could operate a physical robotic appliance that could let you walk as a paraplegic? Okay, now we're talking. What if you could think to a high precision surgery machine that could allow you to conduct a surgery in Israel while you're a doctor in Brazil, or vice versa?
Yep.
Now you're talking. I always like to say that my daughter thinks I'm silly because I log into authenticate weather.com zip code. She says, what's the weather? As a thought experiment, what will my granddaughter think she's silly for? Right? My granddaughter will think my daughter's silly because she even has to ask, right? My granddaughter, right, whether it's something on her body or in her body, will be in communication with the thermostat that knows from her, right, medulla oblongata, that she's feeling a little cold and has preemptively raised the temperature. Now, again, sci-fi and the rest of it wants us to think about what could go wrong. And as leaders, from a governance standpoint, yeah, we got to be out in front of that. But the utility that comes from mind-machine connection, it's good stuff. Oops, sorry. On the information front, the furthest frontier, again, not the end of history, just the furthest frontier we can see, turns the corner from charismatic to creative AI, right? The last vestiges of, the easy discussion in a bar room, like, I wonder which jobs the robots won't take. I don't know. Poets, maybe? False. GPT-3 out of OpenAI in the Valley, right? Sam Altman's organization. You can feed it, as we see here, you feed it the beginning of an imagined Shakespearean style sonnet at the top in bold, and it will automagically write the rest of the sonnet for you. Now, wow. If it were trash, it would be a parlor trick, but it's to a level where like middling Shakespearean scholars think it's pretty good. But the dirty secret is most of us aren't into Shakespeare. And so for us visual learners, here's DALL-E, right? It's a mashup of Salvador Dali and Wall-E, right? The Pixar character. Same organization. This is not a Google search for pictures of an avocado chair, because pictures for avocado chairs don't exist. That's not a thing. But DALL-E don't care, because you feed it a parameter and it will digitally imagine and then paint interpretations, plural, of what an avocado chair might be based on its understanding of semantics, prior art, and your intention. Now, a couple months ago, I'm literally with a client when DALL-E 2 drops, and I'm watching on Twitter as Sam Altman opens it up in that way people do on Twitter. He says, hey, I'm going to generate the first 50 images y'all ask for out of DALL-E 2. And somebody immediately comes in that way one does on Twitter and says, give me a Shiba Inu and a snappy beret. There it is. Not just an admirable, like good job robot, but holy cow, this robot can imagine and paint better than 99.9% of all humans. Well, but give it something interesting, like a sea otter in the style of Vermeer. Yeah, there that is too. And then inevitably, right, because the internet's going to internet, somebody comes in and trolls it, right? Give me blah, 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 blah. To which one of my skeptical colleagues looked at that and he said, I don't see the propeller. But the point is, right, digital creativity is already here, right? And even the poets and the painters need to take note, not that it's an apocalyptic big dumb binary that the robots are coming for them too. Rather, look at all these reinforcements. Look at all this help, right? Look at all these tools. So landing the plane, gang, quantum computing. Okay. We hear a lot about quantum because quantum feels like a winner take all, or maybe more appropriately, a winner take much kind of a paradigm, which is why, even though it's a ways out, organizations are very much interested. And why? Because frankly, if we can solve sticky, wicked 1,000-year math problems with physics instead of arithmetic, we can do a lot of good, right? We can develop quantum chemistry, quantum medicine, quantum biology, logistics, supply chains, you name it. There are still intractable math problems out there that classical computers will get caught up in hairballs with. But with quantum, literally, you can do 10,000-year math problems in 5 seconds. Already, you can. The problem is noise, error correction, scalability, extensibility, reliability. But a lot of these are proven to be engineering problems, not science problems. Richard Feynman, my personal hero, I got a picture of him over in there in the back. He's a charismatic geek. But he famously said, he's like, listen, even us quantum physics types don't understand quantum physics, right? Because it defies our classical experience of the universe. And so the last thing I'm going to do is explain to you how quantum computers work, right? My colleague Scott Buchholz is a Jedi in this space, and he'd be happy to get together with you on this topic. But what I would tell you is, just as we start wondering if Moore's law is at wit's end, right? If the ability to calculate a blockchain hash uses more energy than Ecuador or what have you, just remember that the history of compute is a history of abundance. We find ways of pulling rabbits out of hats right when we tend to feel like we're out of juice and cornered. And quantum is likely our next big rabbit. So gang, here we are with 3, 4, 5 minutes for Q&A, but I'll leave this up. Oh, sorry. Yeah, we can skip that as we talk about it. Boards care. So for those of you who wonder if the boss or the boss's boss gives a rip, they do. They have a fiduciary incentive to look out for icebergs and icebergs beyond icebergs. So futurism is the new strategy, right? Futures thinking is the new design thinking. So, don't be shy about bringing these concepts to your leaders. Mm-hmm. And as leaders, don't be shy about building these capabilities in-house, right? And finally, the number one question I get is, where does one get started? Mm-hmm. Like back to the beginning. We're busy configuring the intranet, man. How do we get started? The idea is really the electric light didn't come from the continuous improvement of candles, right? So allocate a little of your budget to intentionally navigate the new and the next, right? Most of your budget should appropriately be on today, but put a little towards tomorrow and you'll find yourself in a much better spot tomorrow.
And as you say, one thing that I also heard you say, which was brilliant, is the point here is not to be distracted by shiny objects or debate good or bad of it. The ultimate point is to see through this translucency of the future and take steps to arrive there slightly ahead of your competition or slightly ahead of your clients' expectations. That's where this actually is very, very useful, right?
Yep.
Arrive slightly ahead.
Arrive slightly ahead.
Mike, as I thank the audience and let them know what's coming, one question that came up, there are few, actually quite a few. We'll attempt maybe to answer them afterwards if opportunity arises. But people are asking, like, is there a book that you would recommend, something to go to sort of learn more about futurism as a practice? So as you think about that, I want to thank the audience and remind them that we will continue with this series. As a matter of fact, we're going to go through a couple of more CIO interviews over the summer. As a matter of fact, on July 27th, I'll be joined by Bruce Burrows, who is the CIO of Sobeys, one of Canada's largest grocery retailers. And then in August, I'll be joined by Harry Pickett, who is the CIO of Cooperators. So you'll get your notifications both through LinkedIn and through these mailings that I send to you. So since you are on the call, you obviously have registered. I will have your email address and I'll also email you back. Mike, in the closing, any recommendations on any particular books or somebody to follow to learn more about the practice and the art?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And this is not me being a shill, but follow me, you know, as my kids would say, like and subscribe.
There we go.
But from a book standpoint, I think the OG book in this space is Future Shock by Alvin Toffler. It's a 40-year-old book, but it reads every bit as fresh today as it did at the jump. And then for more modern books, I would check out well, I'm signaling it a little bit over here, but there's a great futurist by the name of Amy Webb. She does wonderful work chronicling all manner of things that feel like distractions today, but will be our day jobs tomorrow. She wrote a book called The Genesis Machine about synthetic biology. And I think as an information technologist, it was an eye-opener to me to see how infotech is just a sliver of big T tech these days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mike, I'm very grateful to you. As our global futurist, to find the time to be with us and share this with our Canadian audiences. It is always a pleasure to spend an hour with you. I learned so much. You are wonderful. Thank you.
Hey, back at you, brother. Thank you, Dalibor, for having me. And even if it's digital Canada, it's still my favorite place to be. So thank you so much, folks. Appreciate you. Bye.
Thank you. And obviously, if anybody would like to learn more, this video has been recorded. I'll be happy to email you the link to the raw file. Please email me. And if you'd like to get more into the conversation about how might this be applicable to you, of course, you know where to find us. So with that, thank you all very much and have yourselves a lovely, productive, restful Wednesday afternoon. Bye-bye.